Hi friends, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily news fix. So we're going to be focusing on China today, and always the news out of China is a bit scary, a bit crazy, and always entertaining. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with the developer stuff. So basically, Country Garden, they're trying to restructure their debt. They're trying to raise money. They keep having these deadlines for votes, right? You can see here. But then they get delayed, and this is where it's kind of funky. It's like, well, okay, so what are you guys doing over there? Evidently, though, they are on the hook for $67 million by October 21st. That's if, nothing's restructured, et cetera. So we'll see what happens. I think the vote is on the restructuring of their debt. But I think what's going on, and is, let's look at the news here, is they're scrounging around trying to claw back as much money as they can. They mean the developers, and they also mean the government, and they also meaning probably rich people who have a lot of pressure because they got a lot of angry investors, et cetera. Chinese developers are leaving Australia, evidently, and we have viewers in Australia. I'd love to hear your thoughts if there's any local news coming out of Australia, anything about this. But basically, Chinese money is all around the world, and this is not just something in China. It's everywhere. That's why I wanted to mention it to you guys. And this is sort of the big story, is that China is starting to arrest people. This just came out, so there's not a lot of news on it other than China police detained some staff of the Evergrande wealth unit. So it's more than one person. They're taken into custody. My guess is they're going to raid people's bank accounts, et cetera, try to put the blame on, a few fall people. And the police actually put out a statement basically saying, hey, we're arresting people. If you got any information, please share with us, that kind of stuff. And yes, they do use a cute character, and in fact, it's actually animated. True story. But this is the thing that they're gonna pass the blame on and make arrests. Will they make arrests at more property developers? You never know. I mean, you're talking about really a lot of money. This is 87% down. I guess that their stock. They had froze trading on it. So what is it? Post a loss of 5.38 billion. Billions of dollars. People start to care about this stuff, and moreover, it's the number of people that are affected by these things. You remember the situation is that people basically took out mortgages to get these, and this is just regular people, to get, new apartments, et cetera, and then the apartment's not finished, and then you owe money to the bank, and you have a half-finished apartment that you can't even live in. So it's not a good situation. I know I make jokes about this stuff, but I mean, just be real, the regular people did get hurt by these things, so it's not cool. And there's going to be a lot of, turmoil in China, basically. There's a couple of other stories that are related to the Evergrande arrests. So there were two high cabinet people that have essentially disappeared. That's the word, disappeared, from the public spotlight. So one was like I want to say it was like the foreign minister in the cabinet. And then this is the military, the head of the military, essentially, Minister of Defense. I guess is the proper title. This is actually interesting because both of these guys were picked by President Xi, like himself, I guess. So, it's not like he can blame anyone else. And essentially it's on corruption charges, but who knows? They can just make up anything that they want. I mean, honestly, we don't know. They say whatever they want. And I know this stuff because I used to work in China, and in fact, I write about it in my book. And I just want to mention, if you want to hear some of the stories that I have, my experience in China. My book's called Positive Angles, available on Amazon. Check it out. And if you already got a copy of the book, I encourage you, please leave a review. It helps other people to find it. And you can also post a photo as well, which is really cool. So David did that recently, a few weeks ago. I noticed that. So thank you, David, for your help. I appreciate everyone's help on these things. If you're curious too, I'm just mentioning this. These are, in September, people who bought my book have been in 77% in the United States, 10% in UK, 10% in Canada, and 3% other various countries, right? And 57% paperback and 43% Kindle. I just want to mention that stuff because people always ask, how do you know about China and stuff like that? Well, I read about my book. I share it with you, and you can take a look at that. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening with China and Europe relations. I guess there was like someone arrested in the British Parliament for spying for China. It's like, what? And this kind of stuff, I'm sure it happens all over the world, that, every country has spies on every other country. And basically how it is you just, pay people that are already kind of embedded in the system, money for information, and you start collecting information, et cetera. So we'll see how deep this thing goes. It's just, within this week, Moreover, there's an interesting issue with the EV situation, so electric vehicles in Europe. So Europe's considering putting tariffs on these things. Because here's the basic gist of it: is that let's say you have a company, like a Volkswagen or BMW or whatever, and they're built, and then they have to compete with, say, Chinese companies that come in and build their EVs, but the Chinese companies are supported by the state, where maybe the manufacturers like BMW or Volkswagen don't get so much support from the state. So like, what do you do if you're the state? Do you give more money to your car manufacturers to compete with the Chinese ones that are being supported by essentially taxpayer dollars in China, or do you put higher taxes on them, right, to essentially sort of level the playing field? So we'll see. And this is where Europe is like basically looking into our, Chinese government, are you giving money to your companies or not for a competitive advantage? That'll be an interesting story. And what's even more interesting is, and confusing, to be honest, Trump came out and made a statement about the auto worker strike in the USA, and that basically said that he thinks all EVs will be made in China. Have a listen for yourself.
I'm on the side of making our country great. The auto workers are not going to have any jobs when you come right down to it, because if you take a look at what they're doing with electric cars are going to be made in China. The auto workers are not going to have any. I'll tell you what, the auto workers are being sold down the river by their leadership, and their leadership should endorse Trump. The reason is, you got to have choice. Like in school, I want school choice. I also want choice for cars. If somebody wants gasoline, if somebody wants all electric, they can do whatever they want. But they're destroying the consumer, and they're destroying the auto workers. The auto workers will not have any jobs, Kristen, because all of these cars are going to be made in China. The electric cars automatically are going to be made in China.
And I just wanted to hear it because honestly, I don't quite get where he's going. He's kind of saying, hey, auto workers, you're not going to have any jobs in the future, and we can build whatever we want. Like to me, it just sounds odd because I personally think, right, that hybrids and electric vehicles are the future. I don't think there's any way around that, and consumers are going to want to go for that now. That may take a while down the road. However, he's also saying, let's just give up on building them ourselves because China's going to make them. So I don't know. I mean, you guys can interpret what you want for him, but I just wanted to play that. That's his point of view on that. There's another politician that was really interesting. His name is Mike Gallagher, because he's come in the news a couple of times. I showed you guys this last week. They were playing war games. I mean, it's real. You can see right there. And I made jokes about it, but to me, it is still pretty funny. I mean, they had this thing on the table. It looks like a combination of Risk and Monopoly. You guys can see right there at the bottom of the screen. I'm not making it up. It's right there. And essentially what it is they're looking at, okay, if China does invade Taiwan, what's the implication of that? So looking at economic and military, I'm sure. And actually, I looked more into Mike. He's a new representative out of Wisconsin, just started in January 23. He's a smart guy. I looked him up, and he did his undergrad at Princeton, has a couple degrees from Georgetown, a PhD, I believe. It's like a cool master's and a PhD. And also, too, he served in the United States Marine Corps. So he was an intelligence officer. I want to let you hear him speak for yourself so you can take a look.
Sure. Well, first, credit where credit is due. The executive order does take an important step in the right direction. But if we want to stop fueling our own destruction, I don't think that it can be the last step. Right now, Americans, usually unwittingly, are funding the People's Liberation Army, paying for things like aircraft carriers, stealth fighter jets, artillery shells, and facilitating a mass surveillance and oppression of the Chinese people. And I don't think that any honest analysis of the executive order suggests it would stop that. It gives the Treasury Department the lead. It gives Treasury more off-ramps than the New Jersey Turnpike. And if you listen to what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said, I'm confident she'll take every single one of those off-ramps. And worst of all, the bulk of the national security threat and the vast majority of American investment into China remain untouched by the executive order. We need to restrict public market investments into Chinese firms collaborating with the PLA or complicit in the CCP's human rights abuses, whereas this tackles a narrow subset of private investments. I think the bottom line from my perspective is that the CCP is an adversary, and you don't defeat an adversary or deter an adversary by shoveling billions of dollars into their military and technology program. And we have to ask ourselves if we want the pension fund, the overall retirement health of millions of Americans to be dependent on the success of investing in things like aircraft carriers, artillery shells, and fighter jets.
So as you can see, he's a smart guy, and whether or not I personally agree or disagree with his policy, that's something else. But I don't feel like, oh my God, this guy's a total idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's nothing like that. And I wish more of our politicians would be like Mike in the terms of at least be reasonably intelligent and coherent. So the funny thing will be is if Mike becomes popular and ultimately he runs for Senate or president or whatever, if he ends up changing his rhetoric to basically dumb it down. And that's something like a DeSantis does that. DeSantis is no dummy, but if you watch his speeches, he definitely dumbs down his language. DeSantis, a Harvard grad for law. So I just wanted to point that out because I think the stuff that Gallagher is talking about is interesting. The basic gist of it, as you guys know, and he just said it is what do we do with American investment dollars and pension funds, et cetera, going to support the Chinese military, who is our adversary, as he would say. It is a difficult question. It's actually, too, it's interesting because on YouTube, you have a lot of people out there pumping, Chinese companies. And I always laugh because, oftentimes these kids don't speak Chinese, don't think about China as a country, et cetera, and don't ever mention any of the geopolitical politics other than they say, oh, it's fun, ignore it all. But I'm telling you guys, this stuff is real. You look at this thing here. We got this earlier news that the government had banned the iPhones, right? So that's pretty big news for Apple, and that the Wall Street Journal was reporting that would be more widespread. Now, what's interesting, though, this is a common tactic by the Chinese government, is they'll come out and do doublespeak. They came out and said, this was just on September 13th, that they didn't, in fact, formally ban the iPhones. And it's funny because the Wall Street Journal said they kind of corroborated the story that wasn't necessarily formal. It was kind of an informal thing that essentially it sounded like their bosses were telling employees, hey, we've got a message from up high that don't bring iPhones to work, don't use iPhones, et cetera. It makes us look bad. And I think it's kind of for show, but it is something that's very, very real. It's kind of like, for example, let's say I work for the New York Yankees, right? And I go to work every day, and the base of the boss says, hey, you got to cut, wearing Boston Red Sox gear. Don't do it. Don't let anyone see you do it. It makes us look bad. I think it's that kind of situation when I was reading through this stuff. And then this is actually a statement coming from the China Foreign Ministry. They're saying here that the iPhone has had security incidents. And here's a quote. We have noticed recently that many media have exposed security incidents related to Apple phones. The Chinese government attaches great importance to information and network security. So basically, it was a few years ago where the U.S. government was saying, hey, Huawei is spying on us. They're putting chips in our phones that are going to be, detrimental to our security. And then China's government was, kind of implying that Apple could be doing the same stuff. Whether or not Apple is spying on Chinese people the same way that maybe Huawei is spying on Americans, I'll leave that for you to decide. My personal opinion is, generally speaking, I would trust, what the Americans say and do opposed to what necessarily the Chinese government says and does. So, and you can take that with a grain of salt. Because, this kind of stuff, I try my best to read through everything and cut through the BS and tell you the truth on these things as best of my ability. Some of this stuff, with the arrests of Evergrande people, there's no names released of who's been arrested and stuff like that. Are they arresting the CEO or is it just a secretary? Who knows, right? But we get more information on that. And even when, I'm just telling you, this is just reality. When this stuff comes out, you never know the entire story. Other than you'll probably hear about, like I said, a couple big people who will take the blame for a lot of these things. But whenever there's one or two people that are sort of taking the blame for billions of dollars, it's not like you can just take $1 billion from people, or it's $6 billion or more than that number, and be the only person involved. So this kind of stuff is very far running. However, politically speaking, the Chinese government, they always need to kind of narrow it down and just pick one or two people to blame, because you don't want, from their point of view, which is obvious, you don't want to say, hey, our whole system is corrupt, opposed to just saying, hey, it's just one or two bad actors. So anyway, I always appreciate your time. Love to hear your thoughts on any one of these things, and I'll catch you in the next video.